The guitar is one of the most popular and widely played instruments in the world. It has gone through many developments over the course of several hundred years to arrive at the standard 6-string instrument that we know today. This video will look at the early history of the guitar while featuring one of the first 6-string guitars ever built. Some of the most impressive feats of guitar virtuosity were performed over 200 years ago. Indeed, the 19th century was a golden age of the guitar, with guitarist-composers producing a vast repertoire of outstanding music. This guitar was built at the end of the 18th century and is attributed to the Italian luthier Giuseppe Filano. I have played many historical guitars, but this is perhaps the oldest that I've laid hands on, and in fact very well may be one of the first 6-string guitars ever constructed. In referring to this as the first guitar, I mean more precisely that it is a first-generation 6-string guitar, now commonly called the Romantic guitar or early Romantic guitar. There were, of course, instruments called guitars before this, namely that which we refer to as the Renaissance guitar, and the immediate predecessor to the Romantic guitar, the Baroque guitar. Although the Baroque guitar was prominent across all of Europe, it seems that the innovations that led to the creation of the 6-string Romantic guitar first took place in Italy, particularly in Naples, which was a center for luthiers and instrument builders of all types, violins, mandolins, and guitars. There are a few families whose names are closely connected with the pioneering of the 6-string Romantic guitar: Fabbricatore, Venaccia, Filano, and Guadagnini, one of the most famous names in violin building next to Stradivarius. Other European countries were quick to follow the trend, particularly in France, where we also find some very early guitars. It should also be mentioned that in Spain, around the same time, there was an exploration of the double-strung 6-string guitar. Not only were innovations taking place in a technical sense related to the construction of the instrument, but it's clear that a major shift in taste had occurred. From instruments with a bright sound, double-strung in octaves, with prominent harmonics, to something more resembling the sonorities of a harp, or perhaps the pianoforte, which was gaining prominence at that time. Individual notes with a fuller sound and central core rich in lower partials. New developments in string manufacturing also contributed to the new sound. Although the development and eventual hegemony of the Romantic guitar happened quite rapidly and in a short space of time, there was a period of overlap when both the Romantic and Baroque guitar were being built simultaneously. Let's take a closer look at some of the idiosyncrasies, developments, and differences between earlier guitars and the Romantic guitar. I have here an original Baroque guitar from the late 18th century. Firstly, we see that it is a 5-course instrument. A single course has 2 strings. The top string, called the chanterelle, is often a single string. The romantic guitar does away with the double stringing and adds a sixth bass string to the instrument. Another distinct development is that with the romantic guitar we see the first use of fixed frets, as opposed to the commonly tied-on gut frets that were used in earlier guitars. Presumably with the desire for a new sound, combined with recent developments in string manufacturing, particularly thicker wound basses would wear out the gut frets more quickly, necessitating the use of a stronger and more resilient material. Bone or ivory as well as metal frets were used. Other developments in construction took place. The sides of the body became noticeably thinner, and the bridge began to move up the soundboard, shortening the string length. Romantic guitars would eventually have a much shorter string length than the Baroque guitar. The inner rose of the Baroque guitar is removed, yet a beautiful rosette is maintained. There are some unique features of the very early guitar found in this instrument from Filano. The standardization that we would see in later guitars had not yet taken place. For example, the neck and body meet here at the 11th fret, with a range only going to 14 frets, quite limited at a G. With later developments, primarily of the Viennese luthier Stauffer, we would see the floating fingerboard go up to 22 frets. There are some beautiful details, with a gorgeous ebony fretboard lined with bone inlay that connects to a bone purfling of remarkable construction going along the entire circumference of the soundboard. 7 inlaid bone strips along the back of the neck add to its elegance. We also see the common friction tuning pegs that were used at that time prior to mechanical tuners. This guitar indeed is so early that we still see the use of a tie-on bridge, which was almost universally replaced with pegs, the Spanish tradition aside. Another feature of this guitar and the early Italian guitars is, of course, the mother-of-pearl inlay. The mandolin was one of the most popular instruments in Italy at that time, and many of the first guitar builders were also making mandolins. This type of inlay is typical to the mandolin tradition, in which the family of Filano is well regarded. A sense-defying featherlight instrument, it seems almost lighter than the material from which it is constructed. Now let's look at some aspects of technique and playing the romantic guitar. Although it has become commonplace to perform the great works of the 19th century on modern instruments with the en vogue modern technique, 19th century guitar technique was actually very different. Although it is the standard now to play with nails, it was not so in the 19th century. 19th century guitars were strung with gut, a rather coarse and rough material that does not work well with nails at all. In general, it seems that the standard for an ideal sound was a preference for that which was achieved without nails. Although romantic guitars varied greatly, it seems that there was a standard of a 62 centimeter string length with a 4.4 centimeter nut, significantly smaller than modern instruments. A lower tension, perhaps with gut strings tuned to an even lower pitch, permits a different approach to articulation and ornaments. More importantly, the timbre, the tone, the projection of a romantic guitar is very, very different than a modern guitar. In many ways, the ideal of sound was the opposite from what we seek to achieve with the modern guitar. With the emergence of the 6-string romantic guitar, the 19th century gave birth to a golden age for the instrument, with prodigious, virtuosic player-composers producing a prolific and seemingly endless repertoire. Mauro Giuliani is said to have been the first to master the 6-string instrument. Ferdinando Carulli's opus numbers extend well into the 300s. Fernando Sor, Dionisio Aguado, Napoleon Costa, Luigi Legnani. But there are so many great guitarist composers of that period, many whom until recently have been forgotten. Indeed, with each passing year, new music is being discovered. In recent years, performing on original instruments has become quite popular. Historical guitars are now intensely sought after, with the hope of attaining something closer to the ethos of the period. But moreover, there are very real technical aspects which bring the modern guitarist closer to the performance of the repertoire of the period and perhaps the intentions of the composer. All that having been said, it is no easy task to find an original instrument truly worthy of concert performance at the highest level. Often such instruments will require extensive and costly restoration. This guitar has been beautifully restored by luthier Erich Pierre Hoffmann, one of the leading historians and specialists working with the construction and restoration of historical instruments. Although this guitar is a beauty and true treasure, I have decided to pass this instrument on, and it can now be seen in the Canto Mano Guitar Museum in Berlin, alongside hundreds of other unique specimens of guitar history.